The Kurds, they're the largest ethnic group in the world without their own country. And with many Kurds now demanding autonomy, what are the implications for them and the nations they live in? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. The Kurds have been in the news in the last few years, mainly for their prominent role in the fight against ISIL in Iraq and Syria. But who are the Kurds and what do they want? Together, they make up about 30 million people, united by race, culture and language. The majority are Sunni Muslims, and they live mainly in regions that straddle the borders along Iraq, Iran, Turkey, Syria and Armenia. In Iraq, the Kurds, with a population of 5.5 million, control a largely autonomous region in the northern part of the country. Their regional government is headquartered in Erbil, and their fighting forces, the Peshmerga, have played a significant role in pushing back against Islamic State. In Turkey, there are about 14 million Kurds. There, a separatist group, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, also known as the PKK, is waging an armed struggle for a Kurdish homeland. Its efforts are strongly resisted by Turkish forces, and the bloody conflict has claimed about 40,000 lives since the early 1980s. Last month, Kurds in Syria declared they were setting up a federal region in areas under their control in the northern part of the country. Kurds make up about 10% of the Syrian population, and the self-proclaimed region they want to establish is also known as Rojava. Later in the show, we will have perspectives on Kurdish efforts for autonomy in Iraq and Turkey. But we begin with the Kurds in Syria. Joining me now from Brussels is Saleh Moslim Mohammed. He is co-president of the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, last month, your party, the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party, voted to create a federal region in northern Syria. Why do you think the Kurds in Syria want a federal region?
Our regards again to all your audience and your viewers, watchers, TV. We think what we are doing in the north of Syria or in the Rojava, the place Kurdish people we are calling, is not done by only the Kurdish people. It's by the Kurdish people and the other components which we are living together. And it's a long approach. It's not for one day. I mean, our areas were liberated from the regime since 2012, and then we had to make some arrangements, I mean, to help the people, to aid them, to make the people look after themselves. So we established these democratic self-administrations in our area, and now this area became larger by Shaddadi and Tel Abyad and other places, which they are mostly Arabs, not only the Kurds. So what they have decided, it's a beginning of the project. Actually, they have announced, but the rules and the organizations and even maybe the agreements between the components will take time. It needs about approximately 6 months to be announced. But all the components, after 2 days of a conference held in Rumelan, which is a town in Rojava or in north of Syria, they decided to make a kind of unity. So it's a unity between the components. The name is not important. Maybe it could be federalism or whatever it is. But it is a kind of unity, or for those people, the components in that area, to deal with each other in order to all the Syria to be liberated and to establish a system which is decentralized Syria. It could be federalism or something else, I don't know. It depends on the agreement between the components. So that's what we are looking for. And in our area, just because we are able to make some settlements in our area, because of that, we decided to make this unity. Maybe it could be federalism, or maybe the name even in future could be changed. So this is the case.
So do you think that federalism is the best option for Syria?
Well, we think so. Maybe maybe just because the federalism is not a fixed model. I mean, it depends on the components of the most important. We believe that Syria cannot go back to centralized Syria as it was before under the governing of Baas regime or maybe some other parties. So it should be decentralized Syria.
Right.
All the components feel that they are free and they have their democratic rights.
Okay.
So maybe the federalism could be a solution for that.
Right, but the Syrian government has rejected that. It says that it's illegal for anyone trying to create a federal region within the country, and says that whoever does that is undermining the sovereignty of Syria. How would you respond to that?
Well, the Syrian regime rejects everything because the situation now, which is Syria, is this situation is the regime is the reason for that, because they didn't accept freedom for the people, they didn't accept the democracy, they didn't accept the components' rights, democratic rights. Because of that, the Syria is under this situation, which we are seeing, is the result of what regime was doing. So it means still they don't believe in democracy and the components' rights, democratic rights for the components and even for the individuals. So this is the situation. So
right. So
I mean, the Syrian revolution is just to maybe to make a democratic country.
Right, but
so
this.
If they are thinking of democracy, maybe they can submit the model they believe for future Syria.
But this move
but they
came,
don't believe in it.
Right, this move towards creating this federal region in Syria, it came just as talks are taking place in Geneva on a peace settlement in the whole country, in the whole of Syria. Are the Kurds trying to establish facts on the ground here, even before that meeting, that peace conference, reaches a conclusion?
Well, this is not the case, but we think this solution should be discussed in Geneva talks and Geneva negotiations. But for our announcement, it's not like that. I mean, just because we don't know what's going to be the result of Geneva. Maybe if we know if they are going to be agree of some kind of model of decentralized, maybe we could wait for the results. But what we see, the Geneva talks is not going to go to anywhere, because with the actual situation in Geneva, because from one side is the regime, which is the Baasist mentality, and from the other side, the opposition is not representing all the Syrian people. It's just maybe those Islamic fractions or whatever it is. It's not representing all the components. And they are excluding the Kurds, excluding all Syriacs, excluding, I mean, everybody believes in democracy.
Right. What do Syria's Kurds ultimately want in the country? Would you be satisfied with this federal region, or ultimately do you want a separate nation with independence?
Let me state again, this is not the Kurdish region, because we are talking about the components. We are talking about the Arabs, especially after the liberation of Shaddadi and Tel Abyad and the other places. There are Arabs, Turkmens, and Syriacs. All of them are sharing. So it's not a purely Kurdish state. So we believe, I mean, even in Syria, because we have different components, even from ethnically or from the belief sides. So all these components, they should have their democratic rights. So this federalism is not a model for ourselves, I mean for the Kurds only. For Durzis, for Alawites, for Ismailis, and for the Christians, for Syriacs, and for all the fractions, this is the only solution, what we believe. So I think if we are able to explain everything to the people, the components, they will be persuaded, I mean, for this solution.
What would you say to those who say that here we have a part of the world, a region in the world, which is already suffering from very serious ethnic and sectarian conflict, that creating another autonomous region in the Middle East would just make it more unstable?
Well, we think it's not like this. I mean, the case is completely different. The fighting which we are seeing in Syria now is the result of the maybe dictatorship for depressing all the people trying to make a home again. I mean, one person, one nationality within the Syria. So the result was these clashes, this fighting. Just because they couldn't resolve the problems which they have in Syria. I mean, maybe diversities, and they didn't respect the diversities and the special cases and even the freedom for the individuals. And the result is the situation which we are seeing now in Syria. If they have solved these problems, I mean, between the different components, and so we wouldn't came to this situation.
Okay.
So if we are trying to find a kind of solution, not to go again for the fighting, so we have to know the democracy, to give the democracy to the rights. So the case is completely the opposite of what they are saying.
Okay, sir, thanks for joining us. That's Saleh Moslem Mohammed of the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party joining us from Brussels. We are going to take a short break right now. When we come back, we will look at two other countries with large Kurdish populations. What does the future hold for the Kurds in Iraq and Turkey? Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Kurds and their efforts to win more autonomy, or maybe even their own state. We turn now to the situation in Iraq and Turkey. Kurds make up about 15% of the population in Iraq and have the country's only autonomous region. Meanwhile, in Turkey, the country is locked in a fight between government forces and a Kurdish separatist movement led mainly by the PKK. Joining me now from Erbil is Hiwa Osman. He is an Iraqi Kurdish journalist and commentator, and he's previously served as a media advisor to the former president of Iraq, Jalal Talabani. Also with us from Brussels is Adem Uzun, born in Turkey. He is a member of the Kurdistan National Congress. And joining us from New York is Ali Chinar. He is the executive vice president of the Turkish Heritage Organization. Welcome to all of you to the show. Hiwa Osman, let me start with you in Erbil. The Kurds already have an autonomous region in Iraq, but now Kurdish leaders in Iraq are talking about a referendum. They want independence. Are Kurds in Iraq moving closer to an independent state?
Well, the situation in Iraq is rather different. I mean, in Iraq, the Kurds, in exercising as any other nation, their right to self-determination, in 2003, they decided to stay within Iraq and try the new Iraq, try the constitution. And the application on the constitution, it clearly says that the Iraqi constitution, applying this constitution, is a guarantee of the unity of Iraq. Now, the constitution, as we have seen, has been breached so many times in Iraq. And the Kurds of Iraq cannot sit and wait until the rest of Iraq is put into order, especially that they have their own secure region, their own bureaucracy, their own institutions of governance, and they have proven that in governing their areas, they are quite capable of running a place that looks almost like a state. Now I'm standing here in this city. It just feels like being in a totally different place to the rest of Iraq. Although, I mean, talking about a state can at sometimes be seen as poetic or romantic by some, but really in reality with the Kurds of Iraq seeing the mess just to their south and seeing what's happening to Kurds in other parts where they are being controlled by their central governments, by non-Kurdish governments. Turkey is a blatant example of this, seeing the oppression that's taking place against their fellow Kurds in other countries. They would want some guarantees for their future, and by asking for their own destiny, for their own entity, be it a state, be it a confederation, be it a federation. This will be basically up to the circumstances of the day. But in practice and in reality, the Kurds of Iraq cannot afford to stay longer like this, hanging between a failed state in the rest of the country that they are supposed to be part of, and waiting until this failed state is no longer a failed state for them to go on about their own business. And this is quite worrying. And I must say, pressure is mounting from the street on the leadership of Kurdistan that something has to be done, really. If they want to go to Baghdad, they should do it openly, and if they want to stay, they should also opt for that option. The referendum, I think, that the Iraqi Kurdish leadership is talking about could be a pressure card for all sides to see.
Okay, Adam, Turkey has a significant Kurdish population, something like 15 to 20% of the population. Now we have the PKK, which has been fighting for Turkish autonomy or Turkish independence, battling Turkish forces again. That's after the ceasefire collapsed. What is the ultimate aim of the PKK right now?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much. The PKK is not anymore a separatist organization. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, like many other national liberation movements, initially thought that the creation of an independent state would be the solution to the violence and oppression. However, with the changing of the world, the movement began to develop a fundamental self-criticism as well as a criticism on the dominant police on the time, which was still very much focused on the seizing on the state power. So towards the end of the 90s, the PKK, under the leadership of Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, began to articulate an alternative to the nation state. So the alternative to the nation state could be the democratic confederalism, democratic self-administration, is a social, political, and economical model of self-administration of different peoples. So it attempts to particularly express the people's view. So therefore, the aim of the PKK and the Kurds living in Turkey is to have their fundamental rights recognized in the Turkish constitution, to have the education, official education rights, to be recognized as a nation, to have the political rights, to have their collective rights, to have their organizations' rights, to be like the other peoples in Turkey, like the Turks, to be protected in the constitutions, to live together with the Turks over there in the existing borders. So therefore, they're asking to be recognized like the Turks within the state.
Ali, the Turkish government is taking a very hard line against the PKK. What is the Turkish government prepared to offer the Kurds in Turkey? Are they prepared to recognize them as a separate nation?
No, they will not. I mean, first of all, United States and European Union recognize PKK as a terrorist organization. Turkey has lost 40,000 citizens and security personnel past 40 years. So the Kurds in Turkey also are happy. I mean, education rights, and also they're also in the Turkish parliament too. So I cannot say that the Kurds, all Kurds, are looking for a separate, independent, autonomous entity. I mean, right now, the deputy prime minister and some ministers in the current administrations are Kurdish origin. So I don't agree that, you know, all Kurds are looking at different segment in Turkey, and the Turkish government is taking a hard action to PKK that are targeting the security personnel and civilians.
Okay, let me go back to Hiwa. Hiwa, earlier on you said that, you know, Kurds in Iraq cannot wait for the rest of the country and that they need to move on to their own autonomy. What are the main arguments that Kurds in Iraq are making right now for an independent state?
Well, it really is not an argument that it's not an ulterior motive for the Kurds. It's not something that they have been waiting to achieve from the beginning of Iraq. It's very clear. At the beginning, the Kurds of Iraq, 2003, this is the new Iraq, they waited, they decided to exercise their right to self-determination through being part of Iraq and guaranteed by the constitution. Today it is a different setup. The rest of Iraq is in quite a mess, and this mess is starting to affect Iraqi Kurdistan. And at the same time, the Baghdad government does not seem to be giving too much attention to the rest, or to give too much importance to the Kurds of Iraq. We've been that Baghdad has cut the salary. We've seen how Baghdad cut the salaries or the budget for Kurdistan region since 2013. We have seen how the new government in Iraq, Mr. Abadi, formed a new government, and it doesn't have a single minister from this part of Kurdistan. There is one or two, but he did it in such a way that with a total disregard of the Kurdish factor in Iraq, at a time when with him talking about bureaucratic or technocratic government, at a time where Kurdistan of Iraq is widely seen as much more advanced than the rest of the country, without even trying to use the expertise of this part of Iraq to build his own government. So really the distance between Baghdad and Erbil is widening by the day, and there does not seem to be any will on either side to reconcile this difference. And with every day that passes, I think more Kurdish autonomy is being realized as a de facto. More Kurdish moving away from Baghdad is being realized.
Right.
But the Kurds are also mindful of the fact that Kurdish independence is not going to happen through the barrel of the gun. It has to happen through negotiations and agreements with all the neighbors of Kurdistan region.
Adam, could you respond to what Ali was telling us earlier on, that the PKK is classified both by the United States and the European Union as a terrorist organization?
Yes, I could imagine what Ali is going to say. He's from the Turkish heritage, but it seems he is not aware about the Turkish history. The Turkish state was created with the Kurds and Turks together, but the Kurds were being betrayed by the state. Throughout the history, the Kurds suffered all sorts of denial, oppression, destruction, genocide, and assimilation. They were excluded from all the statist order. So therefore, the Kurds, when they began to ask for their rights, when they uprise, they face an state terror. I can say Kurds are now face and state terror. Okay, the EU and US has put the PKK on the terrorist list in 2002 after the 9/11. When it was 9/11, Turkey made pressure on US to put the PKK in the list, and US make pressure on the EU to put the PKK in the list. Now in the European Parliament in Brussels, where I'm based now, it is an initiative by European parliamentarians. For 114 European parliamentarians are saying this decision from European Union is a false decision. PKK should be delisted from that list, because if you want a peaceful democratic solution, we should not consider one side as a terrorist organization.
Right.
We should give the opportunity for the negotiation.
Ali, what is the Turkish position here? Is it that Kurds should be fully integrated into Turkish society, or is Turkey prepared to offer Kurds a pretty high degree of autonomy?
First of all, I don't agree with Mr. Adam, because we have a 700 years history. I mean, I'm proud of my history, and it's not only Kurdish and Turkish, it's a mix of different ethnicities, religion, and culture came together in Turkey and established the Republic of Turkey. So the Turkey is already embarrassed. Turkey is right now is already working with the Kurds. As I said, Deputy Prime Minister and other ministers are originally from Kurdish, and they have all rights. The media, they have Kurdish newspapers and media outlets, Kurdish schools. I mean, Turkey gave all rights, same as the Turkish citizens. So I don't understand why there is a separation, or they are trying to intend a separation between Turkey and Kurds. So the Turkish government is already giving the rights to Kurds, but the biggest problem is the PKK is trying to have an autonomous in the southern part of Turkey, which Turkey will not accept this. That's why right now Turkey is taking a strong action to PKK, not the Kurds. I need to be very clear on that.
Hiwa, if we talk about a Kurdish state, we're talking about Kurds who live as minorities in 4 different states, in Iraq, in Iran, in Turkey, and in Syria. So ultimately, are Kurds talking about carving up pieces of these 4 countries to create a Kurdish state?
Well, it really depends on the actions of the various states that they live in. I mean, the Arabs do have 22 Arabic countries. I don't think the Kurds are talking now about creating one big united Kurdistan against the will of all these neighboring countries, and this will be an impossible thing to do at this stage. But at the same time, we have to be mindful. It really depends on how the various states that the Kurds live in will operate. Now, as we speak now, a massacre is taking place in Turkey against the Kurdish Turks. In the past, the Kurds of Turkey, in the past, massacres or Kurds of Syria were totally denied their any right to existence or even their identity as Syrians. So the more oppression there is by states, the more denial of Kurdish rights and Kurdish presence in these states there is, the more genocide that takes place, and it happened in Iraqi Kurdistan. This is the result. And it's a very important point that the states where Kurds live in should be mindful of. It happened in the past that Saddam tried even genocide and was unable to do that. So the Kurds can never be put out through military means. And on terrorism, I would just like to add one simple point about the PKK's involvement with terrorism. When ISIS attacked this very city, Erbil, that is supposed to be an ally of Mr. Erdogan, the Turkish president, the PKK were the first forces that came to the rescue to fight ISIS, and not the Turkish army that is pretending to be against ISIS, but in reality it is not.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. We'd love to hear from you, so please send us your questions, comments, and story ideas to theheat@cctv-america.com. And we'd like to continue the conversation on social media. Give us your thoughts and comments on our Facebook page. That's at CCTV America. I'm Anand Naidu. Thanks for watching.